Welcome into another episode of the North Carolina Tar Heels Insider Podcast. I am your host, Logan Lazarchik, as well as lead beat writer for the North Carolina Tar Heels on SI. Back today with another episode, Thursday, June 25th, 2026. Throughout the offseason, we've been talking about the North Carolina Tar Heels basketball program. That's been most of the top storylines we've discussed during this offseason, and we're going to be continuing to focus on that. But in terms of the basketball program, we are going to be talking about a former player and their future in the NBA. But before we get started, just want to thank you guys again for tuning in to today's episode and to each episode throughout the week. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate you guys liking the videos, keeping up to date what we're talking about. You can find this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Believe, and all platforms where you get your podcasts. But without further ado, let's talk about what transpired on Tuesday night in the 2026 NBA draft. Former North Carolina Tar Heels forward Caleb Wilson selected 4th overall by the Chicago Bulls. When you look at this draft class and what it had to offer, it is one of the most tantalizing draft classes in recent memory, and potentially one of the best draft classes of all time. And that'll be contingent on how these players turn out, but just on the anticipation and speculation of how good these players can be. This is an exciting draft class. And, the first 4 picks, there's definitely a tier break. The first 4 picks were definitely all in the first tier with AJ DeBonta, Darren Peterson, Cameron Boozer, and Caleb Wilson. They went in that order. DeBonta went to the Washington Wizards. Darren Peterson went to the Utah Jazz. Cameron Boozer went to the Memphis Grizzlies. And as I just stated, Caleb Wilson went to the Chicago Bulls. And as the draft neared, this became, the reality, the, widely expectation for these first 4 picks. And really the first 6 to 7 picks as the draft neared were pretty much set. But in terms of fit and in terms of what this means for Caleb Wilson, obviously I think this is potentially one of the steals of the draft. And again, it's the 4th pick. So that may be, a hyperbolic, but I do believe that he should have been a top 3 pick. Now, these teams are not only picking based on potential, but they're also picking based on their situation on fit. Cameron Boozer specifically with the Memphis Grizzlies doesn't possess the highest ceiling, but he does provide stability, which is what that organization needs. The whole John Morant situation. They traded Desmond Bane last offseason. They traded Jaren Jackson Jr. during the season. So they're kind of in a rebuild. So Cameron Boozer makes some sense there. I've always believed that Caleb Wilson was the 3rd best player in this draft, and he has the potential to be the overall best player when it's all said and done from this draft class. But in terms of fit, I think Caleb Wilson in Chicago, we obviously know the historic context with the Chicago Bulls and the North Carolina Tar Heels. They drafted Michael Jordan. They drafted Kobe White. So this is another Tar Heel that they are bringing into the organization. And, there's, of course, that's a bunch of the buzz right now is what Caleb Wilson, transitioned from, Michael Jordan, those comparisons. Obviously, Chicago's hoping for a similar type of impact. And obviously, those are huge shoes to fill with Michael Jordan winning 6 NBA titles in Chicago. So Caleb Wilson, obviously a lot of things to work on entering the draft. 2 of the things that he was labeled to improve on, people and scouts and executives want him to improve on, is 3-point shooting and ball handling. I think his ball handling, it's not the cleanest. And for, a 6'9", 211-pound forward, it's not – that's going to be a work in progress for most people. You're not going to be like a Kevin Durant walking in the league as an elite ball handler. Jump shooting, he shot 25.9% from 3-point range last season. Not the best. Obviously, you saw him hit some throughout the season. And again, he missed the final 9 games of the season due to both of his, thumb injury on one hand and fractured wrist on the other. So I think those are the 2 areas where Chicago's going to want to see the most improvement. But again, when I watched Caleb Wilson this past year, I covered him extensively. I watched each and every game. I saw him in Chapel Hill at the Dean E. Smith Center single-handedly dig North Carolina out of a deep hole against the Duke Blue Devils, taking it upon himself to do that. And that's the type of player that you want in your organization. Again, I think Caleb Wilson class act guy. I think he's has a good head on his shoulders. He's driven. He throughout this pre-draft process, he has acknowledged that he wants to be that guy. He wants to be that player for his inheriting organization, for the inheriting team that selects him with a lottery pick. And again, 3-point shooting, ball handling, those are two areas that he needs to improve. But when I watched him last year, his mid-range shot, his shot creativity, the ability to beat defenders in on-ball moves and off the dribble were off the charts. Caleb Wilson, again, North Carolina would not have been where they were without him. And we kind of saw last season what they were once he went down with those two unfortunate injuries. And he's probably the last person you want to see that happen to. He's just such a good player, such a good person. The coaching staff, Hubert Davis talked about it. His teammates spoke about it. When you talk to people, when you listen to what the media says, they all say the same thing, that he's a great person. He has a great attitude. And so for that to happen was disappointing. But I do think that he has a bright future. And obviously Chicago, the Bulls are always consistently in this position of being at the top of the board. They haven't had, this high of a pick in recent years. But Caleb Wilson obviously has the ability to turn this organization around. They recently hired Tiago Splitter, who came from the Portland Trailblazers, as their new head coach. They traded for Nick Claxton earlier this week on a 3-team deal with the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Brooklyn Nets. And then you have Josh Giddey there as well. So the Bulls are building something. And I think speaking of Josh Giddey, I think Caleb Wilson is a perfect fit alongside the point guard, as Giddey wants to push the floor. He wants to push a transition, put pressure on opposing defenses, and Caleb Wilson's athletic ability and overall, explosiveness should be a key factor in that. And Caleb Wilson, again, I think mid-range shot creativity, his 3-point shooting may, people may not think of that because his 3-point shooting was so low last season, but his ability to really make shots near the basket, create new, unique ways to score, I think are underrated aspects of his game. So for me, I think Caleb Wilson, Chicago, obviously is going to take a little bit of time for him to materialize as a player, to develop into his full self. Again, he's only 19 years old. He still has a lot of growing to do. And that's what the NBA really is about, especially with these top picks. You see a lot of 18, 19-year-olds at these picks. And, it's just, in comparison to football, you aren't allowed to enter a draft until after you've, accounted for 3 years in college. So those players are more developed physically, mentally. College basketball, you can be one and done. And so there's a learning curve, obviously from college. Their bodies aren't fully developed. They're still learning the game mentally. It's more about picking players with high potential. Caleb Wilson, as I've stated, may have the highest potential in this draft class. I would say Darren Peterson probably has the highest potential in the draft class, followed by AJ DeBonsa. But I would say Caleb Wilson is the third best player in this draft and also third highest potential. And when I kind of look at Caleb Wilson, he's going to be a starter next season for the Bulls. They need that energizer in the building, in the organization, in the locker room. He's obviously going to start. Again, they're picking at 4 for a reason. They need to be better overall, talent-wise, coaching. I do think under Tiago Splitter will be also, they're moving from Billy Donovan to Tiago Splitter. An interesting transition to watch play out. But again, I think Caleb Wilson, he's going to be a starter. He'll be probably starting the 4 alongside Nick Claxton in the front court for Chicago. And so I think bring Caleb Wilson into this building, into the organization that is clearly in a rebuild. You may see him score a lot of points, produce a lot, may not lead to winning right away. And that's a lot. That's, it's a common theme with a lot of these players that go to organizations that do not have stability at the moment. Comparison to DeBonsa and Peterson, both those teams selecting higher. But when I look at those rosters and where those organizations are in comparison to Chicago, I would say that they're much farther ahead, and that those two players are actually entering situations where they could be on winning teams. Again, when I look at the top 4, all these players I think were perfect fits for these teams. Cameron Boozer again went to Memphis. It's pretty well documented of my opinion on that. I think Caleb Wilson, higher potential, obviously. I think a better player in the long term. Now, right now, Cameron Boozer is that stabilizer. He's has potentially the highest floor in this draft in terms of what you're going to get from him. He could be a 10-year vet averaging 20 and 10. which is something, doesn't, steal the headlines, especially the way he does it. But that's what Memphis needs. And then obviously you have the other two players. But Caleb Wilson, I'm excited to see him play in Chicago. The Bulls, when the Bulls are good, it's better for the NBA. When these big market teams are good, it's good for the sport and sports in general. And so I think Caleb Wilson, obviously throughout the pre-draft process, he talked about Chicago a lot. He met with them a lot, during workouts, during team meetings and all that. So Chicago always felt like the right place for Caleb Wilson. Again, I do expect him to average, I think 18, 19 points in his rookie season is obviously in the realms. I think, shooting efficiency may, it may waver here and there throughout spurts, and we'll see. Because again, this is a young team, a lot of moving parts on this team and coaching staff. It's going to take some time for Chicago to develop into that, a contender potentially. And Caleb Wilson will be the leader of this franchise. He is a potential cornerstone for this team. They're going to build this team around him. And they're going to put as many pieces around him that maximize his skill sets. And again, he's going to have to work on his 3-point shooting. That was specifically an area that he really had to improve in. The 25.9%, not the best. You can always improve 3-point shooting. He's only 18 years old. That's going to improve. So for me, Caleb Wilson, I'm not too worried about the 3-point shooting. I think that's going to be the main thing that they work on with him is ball handling and 3-point shooting. And if those two things fall into place, I do think he's going to be an excellent player for the Bulls for years to come. So again, I was really excited to watch this draft. It was one of the more exciting classes in recent memory, especially compared to the last couple of years. This one was really light years ahead of that. So again, Caleb Wilson to the Chicago Bulls. In terms of what his impact and what he could bring to Chicago, during the pre-draft process, like I said in an interview, he said, "I'm a winner. I'm going to change that culture. I'm going to bring it back to what it was for sure." And it was a great pipeline. North Carolina to Chicago, keep it going. So again, he was expecting Chicago to be the team that selected him. He also talked about how he can change the culture, he can change identity. It's something that he did at North Carolina. And when you watch North Carolina last season, it was apparent that he was the youngest player in that starting lineup, but he was also the best player in that starting lineup. And Seth Trimble talked about it last season. He knew that Caleb Wilson was good, but during practices, that's when Caleb Wilson really proved to him that he's an elite player. And Caleb Wilson, obviously an elite prospect, being the top 4 pick in a potentially historical draft class. But again, Caleb Wilson, I think, could average 18, 19 points his first season. I don't think you're going to see him force a lot of threes just to, force that narrative. I do think he's going to do what he does best, which is posting up, beating defenders off the dribble, exploding to the rim. You're going to see a lot of those things. And then defensively, shot blocker, he averaged 1.5 blocks, 1.4 steals per game at North Carolina last season. So he's a complete package player outside of, his shooting. But you're going to get effort from him on defense. Offensively, he's explosive. So he's really a two-way player that can really dominate. And, while he was speaking to Stephen A. Smith on First Take on Wednesday, he talked about that Kawhi Leonard is a player that he compares himself to. And really, it does make sense. Caleb Wilson said Kawhi Leonard doesn't really waste dribbles. He doesn't use a lot of dribbles to get to his spots. And when you watch Caleb Wilson last season, a lot of jab steps, a lot of just one dribble pull-up, mid-range shots. And that's definitely something that will translate at the next level, which is why I'm so high on him. I think a lot of his skill set and tools translates to the next level. I think a lot of what he does is something that you see on NBA floors and each and every night in the NBA, in the playoffs. 3-point shooting, of course, has been inflated in recent memory, but what really wins games is hitting those mid-range shots, hitting clutch shots at the right times. And I saw him playing. The Duke game was really the game that really, I was already sold on Caleb Wilson, but I think that's what really put him on the map of, okay, this guy does measure up to the other ones, because he dominated Kansas, scoring 24 points, 11 rebounds, really had his way with Kansas. And then Duke, he did really the same thing. He played all 40 minutes. North Carolina won in overtime. Again, they were down, by 15, 13 points early in that game. He had to single-handedly bring them out of that. And the fact that he was a freshman playing all 40 minutes really proved a lot. So again, I'm really excited for North Carolina, or North Carolina's forward, Caleb Wilson, in Chicago. I think the future is bright for him there. and he definitely has the potential to lead Chicago somewhere down the line into a perennial playoff contender. But that will do it for our episode today. Again, I appreciate you guys tuning in each and every day. We are here Monday through Friday during the off season and every day through the season. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and like the video below.